Let me save everyone some time. You, yeah, the one with the visitor badge. In this room, you're a nobody. No desk, no voice, no clearance worth the plastic on your collar. So find a chair against the back wall, touch nothing, and let the people who actually belong on my floor do the work. Colonel Pierce Latimer said it without slowing down. He said it the way a man says a thing he has said 100 times to 100 faces. Mid-stride between the watch desks, one hand already gesturing at someone else. The floor heard it. 9 analysts at their stations, 2 watch officers. A row of glowing screens along the far wall, and above them, a clock counting down in red. The woman with the visitor badge did not answer at once. She did the thing she always did before she spoke. She read the room. 12 screens, 9 analysts. 1 door at the back, steel with a cipher lock and a small red placard turning slow circles in its housing. She counted the exits without looking like she was counting anything. She found the one door that mattered, and she let her eyes rest there for exactly 1 second, and then she moved. She crossed to the back wall. She set down a thin folder, gray, unmarked. She pulled out a chair, and before she sat, she turned her contractor badge face down on the table. A small, flat motion, like setting down a card you do not want read. The Joint Intelligence Operations Center ran in low light. It was built for screens, not for people. Cold air came down steady from the vents, the way water moves over stone, the same temperature for machines and men. The main wall carried the common intelligence picture, a map, tracks, a fix, marked with a confidence rating in the corner. A ticker of source feeds scrolled along the bottom edge, names blacked out, numbers running. Somewhere in the building, 31 hours out, a recovery operation was waiting on this floor to tell it the truth. People Faraday would never meet were going to climb onto aircraft and trust the number on that wall with their lives. No one on the floor knew the operation by its real name. They knew it by a word a computer had picked at random, a word that meant nothing, which was the point. They knew only the shape of it, Americans in a place they should not have been, and a narrow door of hours in which to bring them out, and the plain fact that the door opened and closed on the strength of what this one room got right. That was the weight folded into the cold air. That was what the clock was counting down to. The woman's name on the badge now lying face down was Faraday. The badge said contractor. It said program support. It said nothing else because she had asked it to say nothing else. Senior Airman Mei Otsuka, 19 years old, 2 years in, sat at the station nearest the back wall. She had watched the colonel's hand swing toward the new arrival, and she had felt the old heat climb her face on the woman's behalf. She reached for a spare headset. "You can take the feed from here, ma'am," Otsuka said, quiet. "There's a seat closer if you—" "She doesn't need the feed, Otsuka." Major Hank Delroy crossed between them, clipboard against his chest, the watch officer's walk. "She needs the chair and the quiet. Eyes on your station. We've got a window to make, and we're not making it by playing tour guide." Otsuka put the headset down. She kept her eyes on her station. She did not stop watching the woman against the wall. At the security desk by the entrance, Senior Master Sergeant Odette Sandoval looked up from her log, and what caught her was not the badge. It was the bearing. 26 years of standing at doors had taught her to read people by how they entered a room, and this one had entered like she owned the lease. She had mapped the floor before she sat. She had found the vault door first, the way only certain people find the vault door first. Sandoval had stamped 10,000 badges in her career, and a cold, small instinct told her she had just watched someone very senior pretend to be no one at all. Sandoval did not say anything. That was the job. She wrote a single line in her log. Time, description, one word. Verify. And she let the woman sit. Latimer was already 3 problems past it. He stood at the center watch desk with the day shift lead, jaw set, running the timeline out loud the way he ran everything out loud. He was 50 years old, 28 of them in uniform, and he had built a reputation on never being the slowest decision in the room. He liked his floor fast. He liked it clean. He liked knowing, at a glance, who mattered and who did not. And he had never once been told that the glance was the whole problem. He had looked at the woman in the civilian clothes and the plastic badge, and he had filed her under nobody, and he had moved on. The woman against the wall sat perfectly still, on a floor full of motion, chairs rolling, hands moving, the ticker scrolling. She was the one fixed point. Her hands rested flat. Her breathing was slow. Her eyes were not on the colonel, and they were not on the clock. Her eyes were on the source feed ticker along the bottom of the main wall, where a single line of data scrolled past, tagged with a confidence rating it had not earned, riding toward a brief that would put it in front of people who would believe it. She watched it the way you watch a crack spread across a windshield. Small. Spreading. Already too late to call new. She turned her badge over once with one finger, looked at the face of it for half a second, and turned it down again. By 10:00, the day shift lead had a product to brief, and the floor gathered the way floors do. A loose arc behind the watch desk, Latimer at the center, arms folded. The product was a location fix on the recovery objective. One slide, a grid, a track number, a confidence rating in the corner. High. The lead walked it fast and clean. He sourced it to a feed, gave the time late, gave the math. Latimer nodded along, satisfied, a man watching his floor produce. Around the arc, heads nodded with him, because heads on this floor had learned which way to nod. From the back wall, the woman went still in a different way. It was not the stillness of a person who is bored. It was the stillness of a person who has stopped listening to the answer and started looking at where the answer came from. Everyone on the floor was looking at the fix. She was the only one looking at the lineage tag in the corner of the feed, the small string that says how many independent sources stand behind a number and how they have been joined. She read it once. She read it twice. Then she spoke, low, from the back, and the floor turned. Your fix is riding on a single-source feed tagged as multi-source, Faraday said. The lineage collapsed 2 handoffs ago. Somebody merged a confirming leg that was never confirmed. Paragraph 4-6 of the classification guide. You cannot carry a high confidence rating on a single leg. The track is 271. The time late is 41 minutes. The second source you think you have is the first source wearing a different coat. She did not raise her voice. She gave the figures the way other people give their own phone numbers. The track number, the time late, the merge point. And the room felt the difference between a person guessing and a person remembering. For a moment, nobody moved. The day shift lead looked at his slide. Latimer looked at the woman. We don't take targeting notes from the help, Latimer said. He let it land for the floor. You're a guest. Act like one. Sit down before you embarrass yourself in front of professionals. But the lead had already opened the lineage. He was a careful man under the speed, and careful men check. He found the merge. He found the collapsed leg. He found that the confirming source was a copy of the first source, carrying a different label. One feed, counted twice, dressed up as 2, and stamped high on the strength of its own echo. The lid's face did a quiet thing. He looked at the woman against the wall, and then he looked at Latimer, and then he said nothing at all, because the room had taught him what happens to people who say the colonel's product is wrong out loud. Delroy stepped in to keep the timeline alive. We annotate it and push it forward. We don't blow a national window over a footnote. Flag it, analysts disputed, and move. Higher can sort the lineage on their end. so the wrong product moved up the chain with a footnote stapled to it, instead of a fix folded into it. A footnote is a thing you write so that later, when it burns, you can say you mentioned the smoke. Faraday saw a second thing the floor missed and kept it to herself. The time late on the feed, 41 minutes, meant the objective in the fix was 41 minutes stale at the very best, and a recovery target does not sit still for 41 minutes. The number on the wall was not only thinly sourced, it was old. A team sent to the grid on that slide might arrive at an empty room, or, at a worse one, a room that had been made ready for them. She wrote the time late in her folder beside the lineage note, 2 failures, stacked. And she said nothing, because a person who has just been told to sit down does not earn a second hearing by talking louder. She earns it by being there when the talking stops. At the security desk, Sandoval had already pulled the feed's audit trail. She did it without being asked, because that was also the job. The trail said exactly what the woman had said. 1 source, 2 labels, a confidence rating built on a reflection. Sandoval read it twice. She looked across the dim floor at the still woman against the back wall, the nobody who had quoted paragraph 4-6 by number and been right to the digit, and the cold, small instinct from an hour before turned over and became a question with a shape. Who reads a classification guide by paragraph from memory? Who finds the one door that matters before they sit? Who lets a colonel call her nothing and does not so much as blink? The woman did not look back at her. She had opened her gray folder. She wrote a single line inside it, 1 line, and closed it. Then she squared the folder to true against the edge of the table, both hands, and turned her badge face down again. The fix climbed, the clock fell, and the only person in the building who had seen the crack in the glass sat against the back wall and let them carry it toward the light. The morning watch change was Latimer's stage, and he used it. He stood at the center desk with a coffee in his hand and made the contractor a lesson for the incoming shift. He did not name her. He did not have to. He pointed with his chin at the woman 3 meters off the back wall. Somebody let a records clerk wander onto a live floor and start grading our targeting, he said. That ends today. She gets the back wall. She gets read nothing. She does not touch a keyboard. She does not touch a slide. And if that folder opens one more time, security walks her to the parking lot, and we go back to being a professional operation. We've got a window in 30 hours. I am not babysitting a contractor through it. And I am not letting one more junior analyst stop their watch to fetch her a headset. Are we clear, or do I need to put it on a slide? The floor laughed on cue, the way floors laugh for the man who writes their evaluations. 2 people did not laugh. One was Otsuka, at the log desk now, exiled from the targeting cell. The other was Sandoval, who did not look up from her screen. Delroy carried the next move to the security desk himself. A downgrade request. Strip the contractor's temporary floor access to visitor escort only. No independent movement. No terminal. Nothing. He set it on Sandoval's desk, like a thing already decided. Process this, Senior. Visitor escort only. Effective now. Sandoval looked at the request. She looked at the name on it, and she did a small, slow thing that a careless person would have missed. She did not stamp it. She set it in a tray and wrote a status beside it. Pending verification. It's a contractor badge, Senior, Delroy said. There's nothing to verify. Stamp it and we move on. I verify every access on my floor, sir. She said it evenly, with 26 years behind it. Everyone. Even the ones I'm told to rush, especially those. Delroy looked at her a second too long, then decided a senior master sergeant's paperwork pace was not the hill he wanted, and left it on the desk. Across the floor, Otsuka thought she was helping. She had logged the lineage fix herself, quietly, the night before. Now she carried a printed slip to the back wall and set it by the gray folder, and she whispered it like a gift. "I logged the second leg as unconfirmed," she said. "It's in the record. You were right. I made sure it's in the record where they can't pull it back out." Latimer saw it from across the room, the junior airman leaning over the contractor's table. He did not shout. He did something colder. He pulled Otsuka off the targeting cell in front of everyone and sent her to the log desk by the door, the seat where careers go quiet. Otsuka gathered her things under the eyes of the floor, her ears burning. At the back wall, she stopped for half a second. "I'm sorry," she said, low. You were right, and nobody else in here would even— Don't apologize for being right." It was the only warmth the woman had shown all day, and it was brief, and there was steel under the warmth, like rebar under concrete. Log it twice. Once where they can see it. Once where they can't. Otsuka went to the log desk and did exactly that. It was a small thing, logging it twice, the kind of thing that does not feel like courage while you are doing it. Otsuka was 19. She did not know yet that most of the courage a long career asks of a person looks exactly like this. One true line written into a record on an ordinary afternoon, while the important people are busy being certain about something else. She only knew that the still woman against the wall had told her the truth was worth keeping in two places, and that she believed the woman more than she believed the colonel, and that this, somehow, was the first real decision of her professional life. The woman absorbed the downgrade without a word. She moved to the farther chair when the escort gestured her to it. She squared her folder. She turned her badge face down. She watched the back door, the cipher lock, the red placard turning its slow circles. They had moved her 3 meters farther from the screen. They had not moved her 1 inch farther from the truth. And if it makes your jaw tighten, watching the one person in the room who is right get walked to the back wall for the crime of being right, then good. Hold on to that. Tap subscribe to Honor Tales and stay on this floor with her, because the people who mistook her for nobody are 30 hours from learning exactly who they shut out. By afternoon, the exclusion had become paperwork, which is how the careful kind of cruelty always ends up. Delroy drafted a security concern memo. Subject: an unverified civilian observed attempting to access targeting products without established need to know. He wrote it cleanly, in the flat language of a man covering a floor. He left a draft on the shared printer in the corner, because even careful men forget that printers are public. The woman read it when she passed the printer on the way back from the coffee urn. She did not pick it up. She read it where it lay, top sheet only, and she went still over one line, the line that named her a security concern for caring too much about who was allowed to see a secret. The irony of it sat in the room like the cold air off the vents. They were building a file on her for the offense of access discipline, on a floor that was about to release a compartmented product on the authority of a man who had never once checked his own access list. She went back to the far chair. She opened the visitor terminal, the one thing the downgrade had left her, an unclassified screen with the floor's administrative roster on it. And she read it the way a surgeon reads a chart, top to bottom, fast and without a wasted motion. She found, in 90 seconds, the thing the floor had not checked in 2 days. Not who was on shift, not who was cleared to be in the building. The other list, the one that said who was actually read into the compartment the floor was briefing, who was permitted, by name, to handle the product, to adjudicate it, to release it. Colonel Pierce Latimer's name wasn't on it. He ran the floor. He owned the room. He did not own the compartment. He had never been read into it. He had been signing his name along the edges of a secret the rule did not permit him to touch, and no one had ever made him look, because no one tells the fastest man in the room to slow down and check his own access, She did not write it down. She closed the roster. She turned the page in her gray folder to a clean sheet and let the fact sit where she could feel the weight of it, the way you feel a blade you are not yet holding. It was the same shape as 2013. Not the same names, not the same country, but the same architecture of failure. A confident man at the center of a room. A rule treated as friction. A compartment handled by someone whose only qualification was that he ran the place. She had spent a decade making sure that architecture could not stand again. And here it was, raised plank by plank in front of her, in a building with her name on the program and a strip of plastic on her chest that said she was no one. She breathed once, slow, and let the symmetry pass through her without moving her face. At the center desk, Latimer wrote his own momentum. He told the floor the upchain brief would go at 2000 hours, 8 o'clock, with the single source fix, footnote and all. He told Delroy to get the contractor's badge flagged before the principals dialed in. "I want this floor clean when the seniors are on the line," Latimer said. "No civilian breathing the same air as the principals. Flag the badge. Have it dead by 1800. And put her memo in the morning read file so there's a record we handled it right." "Done by 1800, sir," Delroy said. "Good." Latimer looked once at the woman at the far chair and felt the small, clean satisfaction of a man squaring his desk before a meeting. "I don't like loose ends going into a window." At the security desk, Sandoval intercepted the badge flag request before it reached the system. She held it a moment. Then she picked up the secure phone, not the one that ran up Latimer's chain, the other one, the gray handset that ran sideways, to a program office in another building with no sign on the door. She said a name. She asked one question. She listened for 4 seconds. She said, "Understood." And she set the handset down very softly, the way you set down a thing that has just become heavy. Then Senior Master Sergeant Odette Sandoval sat very still at her desk, the way the woman against the wall sat still, and she looked across the dim floor with a thing in her face that had not been there in the morning. Not suspicion anymore. Certainty, arriving like a tide you cannot argue with. The memo to remove the contractor was signed and time-stamped at 1600. The woman who could have ended all of it with one sentence said nothing. She turned the page in her folder to the access roster she had already memorized, where the colonel's name was missing from the only list that mattered, and she waited for a door. Sandoval caught Latimer in the corridor outside the floor, where the cameras watched, but the team could not hear. She had spent 26 years learning exactly how much she was allowed to say, and the answer, today, was almost nothing. She could not tell him who the woman was. She was not ridden far enough to say it, and even if she had been, the compartment forbade it. She could only stand in front of a colonel and try to talk him back from a ledge she was not permitted to describe. "Sir," she said, "I'm asking you. Leave the contractor alone. Don't flag the badge. Don't put her in a memo. And pull the 2000 brief. Fix the product first, then release it. Please." Latimer stopped. He looked at her the way senior men look at sergeants who bring them weather they did not order. "You're telling a colonel how to run his own floor," he said, "over a records clerk. Do you understand how that reads, Senior? You've got a contractor with an attitude and a security chief who's decided to adopt her. I've seen this before. Somebody charming wanders in, and good people start bending procedure to be nice to her. That's how floors get sloppy. I don't run a sloppy floor. I'm telling you, I verify every access on this floor." Her voice stayed level. "I've verified hers. And that is all I am allowed to say to you. I'm asking you to trust that it's enough. There are reasons I can't say more, and the reasons are the point." For 1 second, something flickered in him. The instinct of a man who has survived 28 years by occasionally listening. Then it closed. He heard the sentence he wanted to hear, which was a sergeant overstepping, and not the one she had actually said. Then put it in writing, he said, or get out of my way. I've got a window. She could not put it in writing. The compartment that protected the woman also gagged the one person trying to save him from her. Sandoval held his eyes for a moment, and then she stepped aside. The look on her face was not defeat. It was the look of someone watching a man walk past the last open exit in a burning building, whistling, certain the smoke is somebody else's problem. Back on the floor, the woman at the far chair was writing in the margin of her gray folder. Supporting fact, in her own hand, the exact access control regulation, that a product built on a compartmented feed may be released only by an officer read into that compartment. She underlined it once. She was not building a complaint. She was timing a door. At the log desk, Otsuka logged everything, the way she'd been told. The downgrade, the memo, the order to push the single source fix at 2000. She did not log it to inform on anyone. She logged it because a woman with steel under her quiet had told her to log it twice, and because some young exact instinct told her the log would matter before the night was out. Sandoval came back to her desk, and before she sat, for the first time all day, she did something small and deliberate in the dark of the floor, where the angle of the cameras and the low light hid it from everyone but the lens. She came to attention, a clean, brief, private position of attention. For a woman, she had been ordered to flag as a trespasser. Then she sat, and her hands were not quite steady on the keys. The senior security chief on this floor just braced up for someone she's been told to walk to the parking lot. And she did it where no one could see. If you want to know what is clipped to that face-down contractor badge that just made a 26-year professional stand at attention in an empty corridor, subscribe and stay right here. Because the door at the back of that room, the steel one, the cipher lock, the red placard turning its slow circles, is about to open. And the only person on the floor who can open it has been sitting against the wall the whole time. You should know who she is now, because the floor never will until it is too late. Late shift. The floor's hum dropped to a single watch. The woman took her cold coffee to an alcove off the main room and sat with it, alone, under a vent that breathed steady as a tide. This is the only place in the story she let herself be a person, and the only place where the narrator will tell you what no one in that room is allowed to know. Her name is Colonel Camille Faraday, United States Air Force. 49 years old. The visitor badge that says contractor is a courtesy of cover. The credential clipped beneath it, face down for 2 days, is not. She is the director of the special access program this entire floor exists to support. The compartment Pierce Latimer is not read into. She built it. She decides who is read in and who is read out. Every person in that room works tonight, inside a thing she made with her own hands. She did not start out senior. In 2013, she was a major, 37 years old, and she ran a compartmented source program overseas. It worked because of one rule, the dullest rule in the building. You do not let a person handle a secret because they are important. You let them handle it because they need it. Need, not rank. Need, not convenience. The rule was boring, and the boring was the whole job. And she believed in it the way some people believe in scripture. Then a senior officer wanted to see the picture. He did not need the source. He needed to feel inside the room, to stand where the secret stood. And someone, not a traitor, never a traitor, just a person who wanted the day to go a little smoother, decided he was important enough to skip the rule. The read-in was granted by convenience. The compartment leaked through the seam where the rule used to be. It was not betrayal. It was a shortcut. Somebody decided a man was important enough to go around the wall, and the wall was the only thing keeping people alive. The network had a name she still does not say out loud. Its case officer was Captain Levi Stahl, 29 years old, her protege. She had taught him the dull rule herself, taught him that the boring discipline was the entire profession, that the paperwork was the thing that kept his people breathing in cities a long way from home. The network was rolled up in a single week. Stahl and the foreign assets he ran did not come home. There was no rescue, no flyover, no folded flag the public ever saw. There was an empty desk and a coffee mug nobody had the heart to move, and a list of names that simply stopped updating one Tuesday and never moved again. They told her it wasn't her fault. A board cleared her in a room with good lighting and careful language. She has never quite forgiven the clearing, because being cleared is not the same as being right, and she has known the difference in her teeth ever since. She had gone to see Stahl's mother after. She had worn civilian clothes then too, because there was nothing she was permitted to say in uniform. She had sat in a small kitchen and not been able to explain why or where or for what. And the woman had made her tea anyway and called her by her first name. And that had been the worst hour of her life, to be thanked for her service by the mother of the man her floor's shortcut had killed. She does not tell that story. She built it into the wall instead. Every read-in she has denied since, every important man she has made wait in a corridor, because need to know is not the same as want to see, has had that kitchen standing behind it. The dull rule is not bureaucracy to her. It is a name and a kitchen and a cup of tea she could not finish. So she rebuilt it. All of it. She spent 10 years turning the dull rule into a wall no convenience could climb. Strict, auditable, no exceptions, no shortcuts for important men in a hurry, no read-ins granted because a colonel wanted to feel inside the room. They promoted her for it. Lieutenant Colonel, Colonel, Director. They gave her the program and a badge that opens every door in it, and she carries that badge face down, because the work was never about being seen. The work was about the door staying shut. She came to this floor quietly as a contractor to watch how the floor handled her compartment before the window opened. And she has spent 2 days watching the exact failure that killed Levi Stahl reassemble itself in one room, piece by piece. A product released by a man not read into the compartment. A single source dressed as two. A confidence rating built on a reflection, climbing toward people who will act on it with their bodies. Every error, back, in order, with the one person who buried those errors 13 years ago sitting against the back wall, being called a nobody. She rinsed the cold coffee in the alcove sink. She squared her gray folder against her hip, and she turned the badge over in her palm, just once, just for herself. The credential side up, the side none of them had earned the right to read, and looked at it the way you look at a thing you paid too much for. Then she clipped it back, face out at last, and walked toward the floor. The trap was set. She had set it herself, and she was the only one in the building who knew the door was already open. 1945 hours, 7:45, 15 minutes to the brief. The product sat in the release queue with Sandoval's flag on it, red, blunt, blocking the push. Release requires compartment read-in. Releasing officer not verified. It was the wall doing its job. It was the dull rule, standing in the doorway, telling a colonel no. And Pierce Latimer reached the moment every gatekeeper reaches, the moment the rule stops being his servant and becomes his obstacle. He overrode it. He used his floor director authority, the authority to run the room, which is not the authority to own the compartment, and he forced the release of a product he had no standing to adjudicate. He typed his justification in 2 lines: operational necessity, time-sensitive window. He told Delroy to send it. My floor, my product, my call. He bit each word off for the watch to hear. Override the flag. The brief goes at 2000. I am not slipping a national window because a sergeant likes her paperwork slow and a contractor likes the sound of her own voice. Send it. Delroy hesitated. It was the first time all day his hand had paused over a key. He looked once at the flag, at the words, "Releasing officer, not verified," and he felt, somewhere under the speed, that he was about to do a thing he could not take back. Then he did the thing that is the whole quiet tragedy of careful men who work for confident ones. He complied. He sent it. At the log desk, Senior Airman May Otska time-stamped the override. 1946. Releasing officer, Latimer, P., Colonel. Compartment read in. None on file. She logged it once where they could see it. She logged it twice where they could not. Her hands were steady now. Some instinct in her had stopped being afraid and started being a witness. The line was crossed. On the record. By his own hand. Latimer turned to the last loose end. "And get her off my floor," he said, jerking his chin at the woman in the far chair. "I don't want a civilian in the building when the principals dial in. Walk her out the front, sign her out, and lock the badge." A security escort started across the floor toward the woman. She stood, unhurried. She gathered the gray folder against her side. She did not look at the escort, and she did not look at the door he was pointing her toward. She looked for the first time in 2 days directly at Pierce Latimer, and she smiled. It was not a triumphant smile. It was quieter and worse than that. It was the smile of a person watching the last piece of a thing they have been waiting on click softly into place. "You overrode a compartment you're not read into," she said. "To release a product you can't verify. To brief people who are going to act on it with their lives. On the record. With your own name and your own hand." She let it sit. "Thank you, Colonel. That was the one part I couldn't do for you." Latimer did not understand it. Not yet. He saw a contractor being escorted out, talking nonsense on her way to the door, and he turned back to his screen to make his brief. The woman did not walk toward the exit the escort indicated. She walked toward the back of the room, toward the steel door, with the cipher lock and the red placard turning its slow circles. And she lifted the badge that had been face down for 2 days, the credential side out now, into the light. The escort moved to stop her. Civilians do not go near that door, and got one step before the air in the room changed. She laid the badge against the inner vault reader. The reader did not make the flat, dead tone a visitor badge makes. It made the other sound. The long chime, the one most people on that floor had heard maybe twice in their careers. And the panel above the door woke up and printed, in clean white letters on black, a string that no one in that room had ever seen come off a contractor's plastic, a compartment code word none of them held, an access tier above the room, and beneath it, 2 words and one more. Program Director. Authority. Unlimited. The red placard over the door rolled, slow, to green. The badge they had called worthless had just opened the one door on the floor that not a single one of them could. For 2 days, the floor had watched that badge lie face down on a table and decided it was nothing. Not one of them had thought to ask why a records contractor sat all day with her credential turned over, the way a card player hides a hand they are not ready to play. Not one of them had asked why she found the vault door first, or quoted the classification guide by paragraph, or never once raised her voice. The answer had been on the table the whole time, face down, 3 meters from a colonel who prided himself on knowing at a glance exactly who mattered in a room. Sandoval was already on her feet. There was no call sign to shout. The program did not run call signs, and the woman had never needed one. So Sandoval did the other thing, the thing security professionals do when the truth finally arrives at the door they have been guarding. She stated the fact, level and clear, for the whole room. "Colonel," Sandoval said to the woman, "the vault reads you in." Then, to the floor, in the voice that turns heads on instinct. "Stand by your stations." Heads came up. The hum stopped. At the log desk, Major Hank Delroy went the color of the screens. The escort took one step back without being told and put his hands behind him like a man who has just understood which direction the muzzle is pointing. The corridor door opened hard. Brigadier General Howard Quist came through it fast. 53, the JIOC commander, pulled out of another room by an override alert and an access hit on a vault that should not have been opening for anyone tonight. He stopped 2 strides in. He took it in. The open door, the green light, the string still glowing on the reader, and the woman standing under it with the badge in her hand. He did not salute. There was no formation to call. He did the only thing the moment required, which was to hand the floor to the person who already owned it. Colonel Faraday. His voice carried, even certain, across the silent room. "The program's in your hands. Your call on the floor. All of it." And Pierce Latimer's face began to move. It started as confusion, the simple animal confusion of a man hearing a rank and a name fixed to a person he had filed under nobody. Then disbelief, the small head shake, the reach for the version of the world he had walked in with that morning. Then recognition, cold and total, as the pieces dropped one after another. The paragraph quoted from memory, the lineage she had caught before anyone else, the sergeant's slow paperwork, the warning in the corridor he had brushed off, the door that had just opened for the contractor and would never, in his career, open for him. Then the last thing, the drop, the understanding of what he had done, on the record, 20 minutes ago, with his own override, in front of the woman who built the wall he had just climbed over to do it. "That's—" Latimer's voice came out wrong, thin. "No, that can't be right. There has to be an error." "There was an error, Colonel," Faraday said. Quiet, almost gentle. "You released it 20 minutes ago." On the main wall, the compartmented product he had pushed up the chain stopped. It froze mid-route under her recall authority, caught one layer short of the principals, hanging in the gap between a colonel's mistake and the people who would have believed it. The floor went still. Every face in the room turned to the woman who for 2 days had sat against the back wall and let them call her nothing. She did not gloat. She worked. Faraday crossed to the watch desk and put her hands on the problem the way a doctor puts hands on a patient who is, for now, still alive. She recalled the released product. She pulled the collapsed lineage apart and rebuilt it with the second leg restored. The unconfirmed leg that Mei Otsuka had logged twice, once where they could see it and once where they could not. She reran the confidence math, dropped the rating from high to where the evidence actually held it, and found the real fix underneath the false one. She walked the corrected product to General Quist herself, clean, sourced, true, in time for the principals. The window held. The recovery operation went forward on good intelligence instead of a reflection. She did in 9 minutes what the floor had refused to do in 2 days, and she did all of it without raising her voice once. Then she dealt with Pierce Latimer, not in front of the room, at the edge of the floor, low, where a lesson can land without an audience to perform it for. "I'm not going to end your career, Colonel," she said. "I think you'd actually prefer that. A court-martial, an investigation, a clean ending you could be angry about for the rest of your life. A story where you were persecuted instead of wrong. I'm not giving it to you." He waited for the blow, braced for it, and it did not come. "Here is what I'm going to do instead," she said. "You're going to keep working. Tonight. This window. On this program. Under me. You ran this floor by who looked important. You never once ran it by who was right. And that access roster you were so proud of, the one you used to decide I was a nobody, you never read it. Your name isn't on the compartment you briefed tonight. It never was. You've been signing the edges of a secret you were never permitted to touch, and the only reason it didn't cost anyone their life is that I was sitting against your back wall when you did it." She let the quiet do the rest. "Read the roster now. Read it every day you sit in that chair. You don't get to leave and feel wronged. You get to stay and do it correctly, exactly where you broke it. That's the sentence." He had no paragraph for it. He sat down at his own watch desk under the eye of the woman he had called nothing, and he opened the roster. He should have opened 2 days before, and he began, at last, to read. No one on the floor would forget it, not the arrest that never came. But the worst thing, the colonel at his own desk, reading a list under the eyes of a woman he had called nobody, learning in front of everyone that the floor had never quite been his to begin with. There is a kind of accounting a court-martial lets a man escape because a trial hands him an enemy and a story, a version where he was persecuted instead of wrong. She had taken both away from him and left him only the truth, which he would now have to carry into the building every morning and set down at that desk. Beside him, Delroy had quietly pulled the roster up on his own screen and was reading it too, the careful way a man checks the locks after a break-in he helped leave open. She turned to the people who had earned the other kind of attention. She crossed to the log desk. "If you've stayed on this floor all the way to the moment the badge turned face up, do the one thing that keeps stories like hers coming. Subscribe to Honor Tales. So the next person who gets called a nobody by someone who never bothered to check finds their story told here, too." Senior Airman Otsuka. Faraday looked at the 19-year-old who had logged it twice. "You saved the second leg. You were the only one in this room who kept the truth somewhere it could be found again. You're done at the log desk." She named the analysis track, the leadership pipeline, the schoolhouse that grows the people who will run floors like this one someday. "Report Monday. That's an order, not a favor. And the next time you're right and the room is wrong, log it twice and don't apologize for either one." "Yes, ma'am," Otsuka said, and something in her stood up straight that was going to stay standing for 30 years. Then she stopped at the security desk, where Odette Sandoval waited. "You verified every access on your floor," Faraday said, "even the one you were told to rush, even when a colonel told you to put it in writing and you couldn't, because the rule that protects me also gagged you, and you stepped aside, and then you braced up in an empty corridor where you thought no one would ever see it." She held the sergeant's eyes. "That's the whole job. That's the only job there ever was. Thank you, Senior Master Sergeant." "Yes, ma'am," Sandoval said. 26 years, and her voice was not quite level. The floor stood down near midnight. The window had held. The screens went quiet. The ticker slowed. The analysts filed out into the dark in 2s and 3s, talking low about the night they would tell, wrong for years. Camille Faraday stayed. She went, alone, into the vault behind the steel door, the one only her badge could open. She sat. She pulled up the access log, the night's record, and she closed it herself, the last entry in her own hand, the way she had closed every log for 13 years. For one moment, in the empty room, she let herself think of Captain Levi Stahl, 29 years old, and the dull rule that had come too late for him and stood now, tonight, behind a door no shortcut could open. Then she turned off the light. No phone buzzed in her pocket. There was no coded greeting, no name of a far port, no voice from a man the world thought was gone. There was only a colonel going home and a green light over a door that stayed shut, and a wall that held, because the one person who knew what it cost was in the room. Every soldier carries a story that few ever hear. Listen with your heart. Thank you for staying and watching. Subscribe to Honor Tales for more.